welcome to another live edition of Blacklisted Radio. It's the 10th day of January 2016. My name is Doug Owen. I am your host. It's good to be back. It's been a long, crazy week. Oh yeah, lots of things have happened. Of course, we like to talk about it here. We do this show live Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can go to blacklistedradio.com. That is the website dedicated to this show, and we have an interactive chat room. You can meet the ambassadors there of this broadcast, and you can also be part of it in a variety of ways. You can hit us up on Twitter. Our handle is BLN Radio. You can text the show 512-222-3067. You can actually text me anytime. Thoughts, complaints, concerns, comments are all welcome. We love constructive criticism, so feel free. It does not hurt my feelings. Most of it's good, though. Most of the stuff that we get from the listening audience is heartwarming. A lot of support. So 2015, a banner year for this show. And it's good to have Ken there in the studio back, mixing it up, working the ones and twos, and taking your phone calls at 800-313-9443. All right. With all of the semantics out of the way. Oh, by the way, exclusive content, all sorts of cool stuff you can get at blacklistedradio.com as well. So go there. All right. Wow. Where do we begin? I guess I was kind of mystified by this saga that's playing out with El Chapo. Of course, he is the leader of the CIA-infiltrated Sinaloa cartel in Mexico. By some estimates, people saying that he is one of the top heroin exporters, a global drug dealer, maybe akin to Pepe Escobar. Pretty powerful guy. If you don't know the backstory, according to Sean Penn in the Rolling Stone interview, he hired German engineers the last time that he was incarcerated to dig a mile-long tunnel to get Mr. Shorty, Chapo, back to freedom. And I guess one of the things that the media does is kind of really magnify, or I guess change the vision that most people have for international drug dealers. I mean, Hollywood has kind of, painted them in this glamorous light. And when you see the reality of where El Chapo is in his ranch, a buddy of his ranch, where he's hiding out, you realize, even though that he might be one of the world's top drug dealers, and I would, of course, point to the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the amount of people dying in this country are from, or the majority dying from drug use are from prescription opioids and other over-the-counter, maybe not over-the-counter, but prescribed drugs. So when it comes to heroin, yeah, it's not good stuff. But when you really look at who he is, and I'm not a fan. Who knows how many people El Chapo has killed in his life. But when you put him against some of the other war criminals we'll talk about tonight, I don't know. It doesn't overwhelm me with this evilness, although he probably is. I'm not an aficionado on El Chapo. I don't know a whole lot about him, but the story about Sean Penn and his friend Kate Del Castillo going to Mexico and meeting with El Chapo. Apparently this happened because El Chapo's lawyer was reaching out to Hollywood. One of the things that a lot of Hollywood producers were trying to do was get in there and get this story about El Chapo when he was incarcerated. So, in Mexico, it's not like the U.S. You can profit from your incarceration in a lot of ways. And he was still running his drug cartel from inside of his room there. Not hard to do when your lawyers are your right-hand men. So that according to Sean Penn's report. So we have a snippet of it. You may have already seen it. Sean Penn asking canned questions that he had to El Chapo. Apparently, they arranged this interview with Sean Penn's, I guess, producer. They don't really go into that. I haven't found the details of that. But anyway, the DEA and the Mexican government followed Sean Penn. And he said several times that he believed that he was being followed. No crap. If you think that the government isn't able to tap into, all of the connections that El Chapo has, then, I mean, you're living in la-la land. The U.S. government spent $21 million back in 2009 rebuilding the telecommunications infrastructure in Mexico, just one of the many, many projects that's a cross collaboration with the Mexican government. But nonetheless, I mean, it's kind of naive to believe that you're going to go down there to Mexico. And I got to give it to Sean Penn. I don't know if a lot of people have already taken the, Sean Penn, Hollywood, working with the government. And there is something to be said for that when you look at history and its close ties, the Central Intelligence Agency with Hollywood, with media. So I don't know. I mean, I really do think the guy is somewhat genuine. During Hurricane Katrina, I mean, there was a lot of actors like Kanye West and Mike Myers asking for money on the TV, and people out there, putting their dollars, putting their money where their mouth was. And I mean, that's impressive. I'm trying to think of the guy that bought a whole Ozarka truck of water, brought it down there. Oh. Anyway, lots of people, a huge outpouring of support. But during Hurricane Katrina, Sean Penn was in a pontoon boat. He was in a boat like rescuing human beings. And when it comes to, on the ground, operating, that guy, I mean, far cry from, his start in Fast Times at Ridgemont High as Spicoli. But then, he married that Charlene woman who was just rabid anti-Second Amendment and made him get rid of all of his guns. And he did that for her. I don't think he's with her anymore. But, I mean, I don't really have a personal opinion of Sean Penn, but pretty ballsy. I mean, if this wasn't an operation, if you didn't have, some kind of paramilitary, private mercenary backup to go and meet with El Chapo in nowhere, Mexico, I mean, that's ballsy. I don't know. The story seems to be manifesting. Guzman, of course, was interested in making a movie. He reached out to studios in 2014. His lawyer approached Del Castillo about the possibility of making a film, but the project was then dropped in favor of a magazine interview rather. So anyway, the senior Obama administration told television news shows on Sunday morning, this morning, that Guzman's boasting about his heroin empire in the interview was maddening, which is, I mean, what do I need to say? When you look at the real drug epidemic in this country, it's not black tar heroin. I mean, there are people that do it and people that die from it, but the real problem is, of course, regulated, government-approved, FDA-stamped drugs that are being used to pacify people and, quite honestly, killing millions of Americans. So, the hypocrisy there, looking at the Afghan drug warlords that the U.S. government has continued to support, and Western governments, the long history of the CIA being instrumental in drug running. And when it comes right down to it, I mean, let's not forget the banks. HSBC, that's right, paid $1.9 billion to regulators. Nobody went to jail, but they were laundering money for people like El Chapo. And if you remember back in 2008, the London Independent and the Telegraph both reported that it was drug money that actually was able to keep banks solvent during that crisis. But here in 2015, we have the new bail-in infrastructure in the UK. The people there that have over 100,000, euros, or the equivalent, somewhere there. If you have a certain amount of money, you may be safe. If there is a bank run, you may be insured. And if the government-run banks are insolvent, then, you may lose a lot of cash. Anyway, those are the new mechanisms, of course, putting all of the risk on the depositor and all of the reward in the hands of the speculators and the brass there. But we'll get more into HSBC. Interesting story, especially considering. I want to talk about Hillary Clinton. She has become the biggest target in the Politico world. Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, anybody else. I don't think anybody else really, their voice in the 2016 campaign matters in the soundbite world as much as Trump, Bernie Sanders, and Hillary Clinton right now. So, Trump, I think some of you think that I'm a big Trump fan, and I'm absolutely not. I just like the fact that he's able to insult the Clintons and do it on a global scale, and he makes good points. Trump has now challenged Hillary to disarm bodyguards. I've made this comment. It's an easy point for people that are gun advocates that believe that they should be armed to protect themselves, just like Nancy Pelosi, just like Barbara Boxer, just like most of these anti-gun people on the left that claim to be anti-gun. They are not anti-gun at all. They love their guns in the hands of their personal bodyguards at their protected, gated, fancy, exclusive compounds that they live in. So, telling her, hey, if you're not for guns, if you think that gun violence is bad, that people don't need guns to protect themselves, well, why don't you have your bodyguards disarm? So, it's just one of those punches right in the face of those that believe that there's certain people that should be allowed guns and not other people. All the fanfare about the open carry now in Texas. We're 10 days in, and the frost is off the pumpkin. It's not as crazy as everybody thought it was going to be. That's like most things. They don't live up to the hype and all of the analysis about the people that are going to be in fear when they go to Subway because there's a guy there with a gun. They're fine with people there with guns as long as they have badges, as long as they are dressed in camo. If they're soldiers, people don't mind that at all. So it's not that guns scare them. It's that people that have not been anointed by the government, working for the government, having guns, in a just paradigm crushing way of looking at that, it's turned out to be absolutely nothing. Anyway, Hillary also taking some, getting into damage control. She has the Bill Clinton rape accuser now coming out saying that he tried to silence her. Woman who publicly accused former President Clinton of raping her in 1978. That was the year that I was born. So do the math. 37 years ago is resurrecting her claims on social media. Quote, I was 35 years old when Bill Clinton, Arkansas Attorney General, raped me, Juanita Broadwick tweeted Wednesday. That's one thing I want to hear Trump say, because they keep talking about all of the indiscretions of Bill Clinton and how he, Hillary was really a strong man for him, while his, the sexism claims by Hillary towards Trump, blah, 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 blah. I know. But, bringing up Jeffrey Epstein. Let's talk about, if you want to talk about sexual indiscretions, guilt by association, let's talk about the death of Vince Foster. Let's talk about the Clinton body count. Come on, Trump. So this is a good start anyway. And, it really pales in comparison to the 3,000 emails that have now come out. Now, you're not going to hear a lot about them in the media for obvious reasons. Levant Report has a great summation, a great write-up on this. But on New Year's Eve, you may have been watching football like millions of Americans. You may have been watching the ball drop. You may have been drinking. That's the perfect time for the government to release documents. They released 3,000 of Hillary Clinton's emails and topics that we talked about on the show here, reasons that we believed that Muammar Gaddafi was dangerous to the establishment, and many of the reasons that most of you, I would say, listening, probably thought that we went into Libya ripe. They were ripe for regime change, and the media machine that pushed this narrative forward are starting to unravel. But it was gold. If you heard this story about Muammar Gaddafi's plan for a gold-backed Libyan dinar, and that being, of course, against the international powers that be, the Rothschilds. Heard that a lot, and I'm sure that they probably had a big hand in it because let's face it. I mean, Gaddafi's son was going to school, yachting, had a private yacht that he and Nat Rothschild frequently vacationed together. So the Rothschilds were very, very close to the Libyans, the Muammar Gaddafi family. So was Tony Blair, as a matter of fact, and so was Hillary Clinton. Actually, the Clinton Global Initiative took lots of money from Muammar Gaddafi and other supporters of Muammar Gaddafi. So they had no problem with that. But then again, I mean, you could see State Department dinners, John Kerry, people like Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie that used to dine with Bashar al-Assad. So from the top of the top to the bottom of the bottom when it comes to where you're at as a world leader, especially a Middle Eastern world leader. Well, anyway, this is a huge bombshell. The New Year's Eve release of 3,000 Clinton emails from the State Department had CNN, the Clinton News Network, a buzz over the gossipy text messages, who gets to ride with Hillary, all of that good stuff. And that's what they really focused on. But the admission that the U.S. knew that there were death squads killing Africans that were deemed blacker Libyans, the more Africans that were really sheltered by Muammar Gaddafi and were seen by those that were being propped up by the U.S. and being trained. Many of the rebel groups, the so-called freedom fighters, the U.S. was training, arming to invade and to instigate, quote-unquote, civil war in Libya, were not only the ethnic reasoning, but also because they were loyalists or seen as loyalists to Gaddafi. I mean, the summary executions, I think a lot of people forget how bloody and horrific that was. The raping, the sodomizing, these death squads. Hillary Clinton knew very well here. A March 27, 2011 intelligence brief on Libya sent by longtime close advisor to the Clintons and Hillary's unofficial intelligence gatherer, Sidney Blumenthal. First there was Goebbels, then there was Karl Rove, then there was Blumenthal, contains clear evidence of war crimes on the part of NATO-backed rebels, citing a rebel commander source speaking in strict confidence to Blumenthal. So we'll get into that, and we've got so much more, my friends. Don't go anywhere. Go to blacklistedраdio.com. We'll be back on the other side. All right, welcome back. It's Blacklisted Radio. 3,000 emails, quite an indictment. Will Hillary pay for her crimes against humanity, her war crimes? Don't bet on it. These people are above the law. They really are part of the Bush-Clinton dynasty. And, of course, I'll always remember Hillary for her most famous saying when talking about Christopher Stevens, when she actually finally went to, was it a Senate panel hearing? Congress? I don't know. I don't remember. But she said, what difference does it make? It's amazing. I mean, the innocence of Muslims video, the propaganda piece that was put out by the State Department, a B-roll flick that allegedly was the reason that this spontaneous mob had sparked this demonstration that turned into the assassination, the burning of a U.S. ambassador. Yeah, what difference does it make now? Well, let's look at some of the other things that preceded the invasion and are well worth noting. War crimes, genocide. Sidney Blumenthal said that this contained clear evidence of war crimes on the part of NATO-backed rebels. They turned a blind eye to that. Summary executions. They were also killing mercenaries, private contractors. So just about anybody that was there. And of course, we don't hear about people at Blackwater that may have died. Not only did Muammar Gaddafi have a group of hot female bodyguards. I mean, something kind of out of it's something, you watch the Austin Powers series with Dr. Evil. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you'd expect. I mean, over the top, yeah. Pretty crazy. I don't even like to use those terms. Crazy. An eccentric. Maybe not a good guy necessarily. I mean, Muammar Gaddafi, pretty brutal. But I mean, if you see how the Saudi Arabian government executes people that are critical, that challenge the state on a monthly basis, I mean, they're beheading more people than ISIS. I mean, that's kind of standard. I mean, you have to juxtapose it to that. Evil, horrible guy. Yeah. Do we work with, the Qataris who, have literal human slaves? The UAE that has turned a blind eye to its political and family elites, beating and murdering man-boy servants. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the horrendous things that happen in the Middle East. Nothing more horrible than what has been unleashed upon the citizens than by none other than the West. So, interesting thing here. There's documentation by journalists, academics, and human rights groups demonstrating that the black Libyan civilians and sub-Saharan contract workers, a population favored by Gaddafi and his pro-African Union policies, were targets of racial cleansing. More on that. The same intelligence email from Sidney Blumenthal also confirmed what has become a well-known theme of Western-supported insurgencies, the contradiction of special forces training militias that are simultaneously suspected of links to Al-Qaeda. So the U.S. going after Al-Qaeda and, of course, at the same time supporting Al-Qaeda. Muammar Gaddafi knew he was well aware of what was going on and actually confronted Tony Blair about it. Another recently released conversation. Blumenthal related that he had heard rumors, of course, that actually related that he had an extremely sensitive source confirmed that British, French, and Egyptian special operations units were training Libyan militants along the border and also in the Benghazi suburbs. But interestingly enough, the oil and the gold interests, and it's no surprise that an email from somebody who identifies French President Nicolas Sarkozy as leading the attack on Libya with 5 specific purposes in the mind: to attain Libyan oil, ensure French influence in the region, increase Sarkozy's reputation, assert French military power, and prevent Gaddafi's influence in what is considered as the, and I had never heard of this, Francophone Africa. They were very worried about this. This gold. Oh, we'll have to take another quick break. We'll be back. 30 minutes to go. We're only halfway through this, so stay tuned. More coming your way. It's the one and only Blacklisted Radio. Well, Africa is one of the biggest targets. The untapped resources. Muammar Gaddafi had a lot of thoughts on his own. He planned a Pan-African currency based in a Libyan gold dinar and Nicolas Sarkozy not so happy about it. Of course, he's had his own issues, been indicted twice, had his offices raided. So I don't really know what to make of Sarkozy or where he lies. I mean, it seems that the French are really quick to indict. I don't know if they're any more, conscious of criminality and more upset. They do riot quite a bit, but you had the whole sex scandal with Dominique Strauss-Kahn, the IMF director, now current IMF chief, Christine Lagarde, under investigation. But anyway, that's why, of course, the French committed themselves to the fight, one of the first. And he, of course, Sarkozy, being the architect of the Mediterranean Union. That didn't come to fruition, but if you Google Mediterranean Union, you'll see this grandiose idea. And a gold-backed African currency would have made them much more independent. I mean, right now we only have 4 countries in the world that are not tied into the international financial system, Cuba being one, and they're working on it really hard, North Korea, and I'm trying to think of the other 2. It doesn't matter. But not too many people that are, outliers from the international financial institutions and world banking system. But nonetheless, I mean, the $7 billion in gold, which doesn't even seem like that much at this point, the Francophone African currency coming to fruition. Now, so that's mainly why the French intervened. I don't know how much that would have affected the U.S. dollar or what a factor that would have played. The U.S. had plenty of reasons, and so did other international NATO partners for turning a blind eye, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and the like. Now, we all heard the rumors that Muammar Gaddafi was giving his troops Viagra so that they could get super hard and rape and pillage people because, when you're in a war zone, that's what you want your troops doing. I mean, listening to the stories of, coming out of the mainstream media at the time, it just seemed absurd. I mean, why would you do that? It has to be propaganda. I immediately thought that, and now sources have confirmed. And, Blumenthal himself says here to Hillary that this was a rumor, but he has, a confidential source that has heard this. That became truth to the American people's ears. Just one of the many other reasons why we should turn a blind eye to what happened in Libya. So, I mean, when you look at the crimes committed by Hillary Clinton and the Clinton crime family, not to mention all the neoconservatives and others that saw this as part of a larger, broader plan to franchise America, to rebuild and to basically institute 21st century imperialism in the Horn of Africa and in the Middle East. I mean, this is this is the dream of a lot of different factions. And, of course, the expanding of the U.S. dollar dominance, creating new markets, business as usual. So there's that. I think it's very mention-worthy. We have what's happening in Germany. I haven't commented really on this as of yet. You have the rape-pugies that they're calling them. While Hillary Clinton's email trove was dumped on the public, people in Cologne were being groped, young women, in a mass groping that happened that the German media, including all the way up to their president, Angela Merkel, has tried to not acknowledge, to sweep under the rug. And the same week that now people in Germany can read Mein Kampf, the 20-year ban has just been lifted, and of course you could probably get a copy of Mein Kampf if you wanted it beforehand. But the irony that the prohibition of Mein Kampf would somehow limit people from racist ideas, from singling out ethnic groups for their inadequacies, or glorifying Hitler and his plan for a new solution. It's the leftist thoughts and current policies, the European Union mass immigration, that has brought that back into popularity in Germany. Not what Hitler said 80 years ago in a book that kind of rambles at points, kind of like this show. Sorry, but anyway, there's definitely some symbolism there, and I think it's well worth noting. You have these people that showed up. 1,700 people attended a rally, and of course they're upset. They want government accountability. When you look at what's happening to the country, I mean, when you bring in millions of people, and next year they're estimated to bring in another million refugees, the ability to vet people is almost impossible. If you look at how well the different counties and cities around the U.S. are able to vet good police officers, you see that that's pretty lacking. You can only imagine what's happening here. I got a lot of criticism for blaming the refugees. I briefly mentioned that you have essentially an invasion in Europe, and people want me to point out that it's U.S. policies, our wars, the supporting of Al-Qaeda, the supporting of groups, or the engendering of groups like ISIS that have led to this mass exodus. You can't blame people for leaving. I would like to see them stand there and take over their government and take it back from these people that are currently in control, rather than just hightailing it. I mean, that would be my personal preference, but my personal preference is one of 300 and I don't know how many million people live in this country too. But anyway, this has turned into a huge nightmare, and it is something that we are going to continue to see as a huge issue. And Germany has tried their best to just ignore this, to pretend that it's not happening, to say that everything's fine over and over again. Meanwhile, you may see a huge shattering of the very fabric of the European Union, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, because of the institutions that primarily dominated. When you have people in Brussels, when you have people in London that think that they know what's best for somebody in Greece, I mean, we've seen the fruit of that, of those economic central planners, and what that's unleashed. So, crazy stuff. China this week has once again sent tremors across markets and across the world, not just the alleged hydrogen bomb scare by North Korea that seems to be always there. There's always a big bomb scare, and there's always the retort. We sent a B-52 over South Korea, a little flexing of muscles. I think it's kind of a way to set off 2016 and to remind everybody that we have to be scared, and international or intercontinental global thermonuclear war is always a potential. But 2 times this week, the circuit breakers had to shut down the Chinese stock exchange. We're seeing a huge plunge. And I mean, all of the metrics. I'm not a big doom, end of the world economic scenario guy. And it's not that I don't think that a crash isn't coming, but you do have cycles, booms and busts, and the aforementioned hype that always surrounds it. 2015 was going to be the year that all the bonds were going to blow up. Did not quite happen. Did things get worse? Do we see a true depression taking hold in this country? Yes, I think so. The Chinese manufacturing numbers, and the PMI kind of prove that that the U.S. consumers are not able to consume at the same rapid rate, and most of that's because the majority of Americans, what is it, 62% of them don't have $1,000. I mean, some of you, myself, barely escapes that category of people that don't have $1,000 in savings. So people are living check to check, and you would think with gas approaching some estimates as low as $1, that this would stimulate the economy in a variety of ways. It just has not. So circuit breakers went off 2 times. That means, they just shut it down. It's about to crash. Shut the machine down. We found out that China's plunge protection team bought $1.8 trillion in stocks. $1.8 trillion in stocks. And when you have the government buying stocks, investing your money secretly into stocks, private companies or public companies, in central banks and all of these different markets, it creates this distortion, and it really does create systemic fascism in its most classical sense. When you have the government propping up Lockheed Martin, or the government propping up XYZ hedge fund, the government making decisions and investing your money in buying stocks because these companies cannot systemically, they call them SIFIs, systemically important financial institutions. Those are the banks, and then you have global blue chip Fortune 500 companies and other companies that make up these portfolios and buying into this fake stock market. And that's really what it becomes. I mean, spare all the, super in-depth analysis. When the government decides which companies survive and which companies fail, those people in government that wield that power, the regulators, of course, are going to support companies that are supporting them. It only makes sense. It's called a strategic advantage, and Congress can actually take money. They can actually bribe themselves, and it's completely legal, which just seems crazy to me. Speaking of crazy, I mentioned international war criminals. Henry Kissinger is now partnering up with HSBC International Bank. And the funny thing is, now that he is part of this reforming of the HSBC, Criminal International Drug Laundering Bank, which only seems apropos. He is trying to finalize the new location, helping with finalizing the new location of their new headquarters. I don't think it's going to be in Cambodia or anywhere in South America that he is wanted for war crimes. And I'm not one of these guys that thinks that Henry Kissinger runs the world. Although, I don't know if you heard, but Mark Zuckerberg is reading Henry Kissinger's World Order, one of his favorite new books that, you can read it. I've read some of it. I've read excerpts and many quotes from World Order, but he just goes on in this interview, and it actually came out back in December. I didn't pick up on it until just I think over the last week, but I mean it's so telling. So now you have this international cartel now with Henry Kissinger at the helm. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. Of course, you remember U.S. prosecutors, Elizabeth Warren. They were going to go after those big banks. They paid $1.9 billion. I mean, that's a lot of money back in 2012. And they have spent, I was just looking at how many different fines. I just put HSBC fined into Google News. And there's like hundreds of articles on all of the different fines that they've paid over the years. It's quite amazing. Quite amazing. I mean, here's one from June 4, 2015, $28 million in money laundering and the like. So there you go. Let's see. I don't think so, Mike. There you go. So I saw this, and I thought, well, I don't really know what to make of it. Governor Jim Abbott, he's the successor to Rick Perry. He is the governor of Texas currently, and he has a new idea to wrest power from Obama. Everybody upset about, of course, the executive action he's taking on guns. And the new proposal, of course, if you didn't hear, one of the new pushes is for smart guns. Basically, you have a bracelet, maybe a Bluetooth device attached to your wrist, and the gun will only fire for the owner. Now, you could imagine that not being very effective, and the chances for it to not work are probably pretty high. And you got some kind of transmitter or embedded RFID chip. It's no surprise, against crony capitalism, sourced Reuters, that he received hundreds of thousands of dollars, his campaign, right before the announcement of these new executive orders, which are almost always written by lawyers, and most especially corporate lawyers. So, it's just cronyism in your face. I'm the king. I'm making laws that financially benefit me. So what? Nanny, boo-boo. And people are pretty upset about it. You now have the framework for somebody to be stripped of their right to have a firearm without any kind of judice or prudence, without a judge getting involved. Jurisprudence, that's what I was trying to say there. Without having a legal remedy for being able, or basically the government having the right to take away your constitutional right without a judge. It's pretty inflammatory. It's damn outrageous, if you ask me. We will take a quick break. Final segment on the other side. Don't go anywhere. It's Blacklisted Radio. Due process, those kind of things, they are being taken away from people. And I guess once you accept that, felons or certain people that have wronged others, or for a variety of reasons cannot have a firearm, then that right is no longer unalienable. It is very subjective. And, I think that the problem is that people, they look at the amendment, which defines what the government cannot do when it comes to the Second Amendment, and it could be repealed. Nobody talks about that, but if the Democrats and everybody in the world was so outraged, and there was so much support for more gun laws, which Gallup has proven there is not, then it should be pretty easy to repeal, and it's not. So anyway, constitutional conventions, they scare me. Anytime you open up the Constitution and start changing it, I don't know. It opens the door. It's like opening Pandora's box. He has a proposal with 9 amendments. I think some of them make sense. Prohibit Congress from regulating activity that occurs wholly within a state. Require Congress to balance its budget. Good luck. Prohibit administrative agencies from creating federal law. Prohibit administrative agencies from preempting state law. And several others that seem like a pretty good idea if the government actually followed the law. And that's the problem. We have a constitution that guarantees us, and a framework that guarantees us a somewhat accountable government. It should. It does not, because people do not follow the Constitution, and the interpretations of the Constitution can be, it's an interpretation. That's what the Supreme Court does. They interpret the founders' intent, and sometimes they're right, and many times they're wrong. I saw the jackpot exceeding $950 million for the Powerball. Man, you wouldn't think that there was a Powerball scandal going on. Despite the jackpot fixing scandal that rocked the lottery organization behind Powerball, it's actually done almost nothing to hold back people from paying money to try to win this. And I just find it fascinating that people give their hard-earned money and give it to these lotteries, the state-run, government-regulated gambling, which is okay. But they're going after fantasy sports. They're going after FanDuel, and you're not allowed to gamble unless it's with the state. And the state, they want a monopoly on this. Maybe I'm cynical, but when you see Cuomo in New York going after fantasy sports, going after these sites, DraftKings, it's because they're not getting a piece of the pie. But even when people know that it's rigged, it doesn't stop them. And it's kind of a metaphor for, I think, it's a realization for me that no matter how many people I convince that 9/11 was an inside job, people are still going to buy into something on a grand scale. No matter how fake it may be, people still believe and they still hope that they can get that money, even though it's probably going to give somebody a lot of money. And it's not going to be them. It might be a friend of the jackpot running organization, the government. There's that. If you didn't hear, there was a plot to kidnap one of Obama's dogs. The man, he said that he was the son of the former President JFK and actress Marilyn Monroe. I don't know about that, but anyway, he didn't get the Portuguese water dogs. So if you're worrying about that, the First Lady and her dogs are safe. All right, guys, so much more we didn't get to. We'll wrap it up. Thanks for being part of the show. I have had a great time. I hope you did as well. You can go to Blacklisted Radio. Please do support the show. I want to thank Sarah. She is our big $10 supporter for the week. So, Sarah, thank you for that. And you can, of course, let people know that we're out here. That's one of the best ways you can support us with your voice. Till next week, take care.